Hello everyone, and welcome back to I Love You Tea with Trashellie, not sponsored by Yui Hirahara. This is a little podcast that we record in our I Love You Discord server where we talk about various themes and topics through the story I Love You. We have been away for a little while due to some personal circumstances, so thank you to everyone who is tuning back in now and has been patient as we have been on a break. You can find both this episode and previous episodes on both YouTube and Spotify on the I Love You Tea with Trashellie channels, as well as some clips and highlights on our TikTok account. So we have been doing a series on character dives. Last time we were here, we were talking about Meg and Yujing, and today we want to talk about A Tale of Two Dads.
If you're reading I Love You and the recent chapter left you blue, or feeling like it's too good to be true, we get together and share our theory, bend down and praise the almighty Quimchi. Come join us for tea with Trashellie.
Yay! We love you. I love you, dads.
So today we are going to be talking about Simhan and Rand and kind of their place in the narrative, their characters, their life, and the parallels between the two of them.
Yeah, they're parallels, and I guess to some degree we could say that there's some foils going on in there as well.
Yes.
So we were talking about starting tonight with Simhan, right?
Yes.
So something that I want to preface before we get deep into this episode is I feel like both Simhan and Rand really represent the kind of difficulties of having obligations on top of being very not having total control of your own life, right? And while obviously this is a case for all parents, nobody has complete and total control unless maybe you're Yui. Especially for these two, it feels like they are both so very bound by their circumstances, and that has affected their family and children. And I just want to put that out there because I feel like, especially with a character like Simhan, who life has never really been on his side, right? He's never been thrown the kinds of opportunities that we see Shin-ae currently has. And I feel like I don't want to say it's tricky to talk about, but I feel like it's always worth acknowledging that while he very much has an obligation to his family, we have to also acknowledge that there is only so much that a person can do with the situations they're given, right?
And that's ultimately such a hard thing, especially with parents and specifically parent characters in I Love You who really do want to try to do what's best. They're not someone like Yui who is actively, consciously abusing their children. But sometimes you can be trying your best and bound by circumstances and also making bad choices. And your intentions can be good and you can be doing basically all that you can do sometimes, and it still isn't enough. And that's a really hard thing to talk about and to sometimes kind of lay in and sit with, like, where do and don't we assign blame for things, and where could and couldn't things have been different?
Right. It's really easy to look at Simhan's circumstances, which we're going to get into, and look at him as, he was never there enough for Shin-ae. He failed her in all of these ways. But also, we have to step back and, like you're saying, how do we define that? Where do we decide that boundary is? When it's kind of like, if somebody's doing the best within their means that they've been given, it's like, it feels, I don't want to say that we shouldn't, but it feels difficult to condemn them for a lot of things. I mean, there are some very clear things that we will talk about that we fully acknowledge that they are to blame for, right? But it feels, and I think that this is the whole point of both of their stories, is that it's so difficult to truly condemn them for things. Especially when it's like in the case of Rand, for real good example, where it's so clear how he's affected people, but when we step back and look at him, it's like, but what could he have really done differently, and would it have made any difference? And I think that's kind of a really good approach to take as we talk about these characters, because, and I know I talk about this a lot in different episodes and stuff, but I feel like that's one of the greatest difficulties of parenthood, right? Is that you have this obligation to other people. And how do you take care of these other people when you're struggling to take care of yourself, when you're struggling to get by yourself? And I think that is kind of, I think that's a theme that our main characters are going to have to come to contend with in time, like acknowledging, hey, I feel like I was failed in all of these ways, but, what could they have really done differently? I don't say that, like this is their means to forgive them, but more just like in order for you to let go of something and move on, being able to come to that conclusion yourself is going to be really important. And I think that it's really good to keep that in mind when we talk about these characters, because like you said, it's not like Yui, who is very, she's aware of what she's doing. She knows that, like in her, whether or not she justifies what she's doing, she knows that it's unconventional. Like she
And
literally tells Kosuke that.
and she knows that it's for herself.
Right.
Where,
Like she is self-serving, and she does not deny that.
yeah, where a lot of times, like especially parents who mess up will maintain that belief that, even if it ended up bad, they were doing it for their child. And both Rand and Simhan are definitely characters who do that, where like ultimately all of the mistakes they've made at the core of pretty much all of it is that like I thought that I was doing the best that I could for the kids. And like sometimes, like in the case of Rand, you end up actively abusing your kids, not like in that like thinking that you have to do X or X. But in the case of someone like Yui, she knows that this isn't good for Kosuke, and she knows that she's abusing him, and she knows that she's doing it for her need. She thinks that she needs to do it in order to get her own needs met, but she at least knows that it's not for Kosuke.
Right. And I think that's the thing that really gets me the most about both Shimhan and Rand, is that they really are trying. They, I think when you get so deep in a certain kind of hole, right? Or if you get so deep in a dark cave, it's really hard to see beyond those circumstances, and it's really hard to see your other options. And I feel like this is, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about how this really applies to Rand, but I feel like that really heavily applies to Shimhan too, where he's essentially blinded himself, right? Like they have really terrible circumstances. He works a job that is not paying enough. They can't make rent. They can't that like they can't afford food on top of not being able to make rent. He's trying to pick up as many extra shifts as he possibly can to help make more money. But in doing so, it means he's never around at home, and he can't make it to any events with Shin-ae, whether it's something, like at school, like back in middle school, or just, like coming home and eating burgers with her. And it's like, oh, we got to take a rain check. Oh, we got to do this. And obviously, in his eyes, this is what he has to do, because what other option is there? And like in doing that, in all the extra work and stress that he's taking on, he has developed an addiction, because we know that he drinks because that's kind of the only thing that helps him cope, it probably started as, like it takes my mind off of things and helps me fall asleep thing until it became, an actual active crutch. And I do also want to take this moment to acknowledge that alcoholism is very much a disease. Addiction in general is very much a disease. And it's not easy to get over on your own, right? But if you're in his position where you can't even afford to buy food or make rent, you don't have the means to actually get help for your problems. And also, I think it's worth also noting that alcoholism is still very normalized to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, having some drinks before bed to help you sleep. Yeah, that's totally normal. So many people do it. And it's like that doesn't make it good though,
It's
And
like,
so oh, go on.
I was gonna say, and like with Simhan, it's such a cycle because, like you said, he's already in this bad financial situation for various reasons, and he starts drinking to cope. But then because he's spending all of his money on his coping mechanism, he has even less to meet his financial needs. And then the worse his financial needs get, the more he needs to cope, and then the worse his financial needs get. And then when it comes time for him to go, hey, I need help, like something has to pull me out of this, he needs money to both get rid of the stressors that are making him want to drink and to treat his addiction, because AA is not an actually evidence-based treatment. It's just free, um, which is why it's so popular. And he, it's just it. He needs to stop drinking so that he can have money, but he needs money to be able to stop drinking. And without getting some money from some source that he doesn't have it, he can't do either of those things effectively. And that's not to say that he's automatically doomed, that, nothing will ever work, that he can't, like, there's no possibility in the world that anything will happen, but it makes it so, so much harder for someone, especially who already has it so hard.
Right. It is a very vicious cycle. And I'm I like to point it out because you and I are people who both understand very intimately that you can't just quit an addiction, Like, I know a lot of people say that it's that easy, that like if you care about your daughter, you would stop drinking, you would stop spending your money like that. And like, I mean, I get it, I do, but it's also like you have to be able to look at it from that angle that you have said, where in order to really get that help, you need to be able to afford it. And the people who can't afford it are the people who, need it so badly. And that's one of the great fun results of capitalism, our favorite. Yay. Um, but like you also pointed out that, there are things within Shimhan's actions that he can take responsibility for, right? We're acknowledging how difficult it is to quit drinking and, get over an addiction. But at the same time, like you said, by taking what little finances they have available and spending it all on alcohol, they can't even afford food, like Shin-ae's literally taking his bottles and cans to the recycling place to get money for them so that she can afford eggs, which would not even fly in our current economy because eggs keep getting so expensive. um,
They don't get to have
but
eggs anymore.
right, it's like maybe you can afford some stale bread, maybe, uh, and and
Simhan
that's
Lane is parallel.
and that's the really difficult thing, because we have also seen that there was a time where Simhan was actively trying to do something, right? He decides it's time, I'm going to go back to school. And obviously this is where everything falls apart and why Shin-ae carries so much guilt and feels responsibility. I guess more like feels like a burden, really. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. Because Simhan, he's getting ready to go back to school so that he can get a better job, because right at that time he was working in a nursing home, wasn't he?
Yes.
Is he? I don't think is he still? I can't remember.
I think he now works at a hospital.
A hospital, that's right, because
Yeah.
Shin-ae, the local hospital. We're
Yeah,
good.
but
We're good.
he never got nursing certified or anything. He never moved up
Right.
in his career
So he
because, like
can't
you
get
said,
that pay raise that he was counting on.
yeah. And it's like he was ready to go back to school. He had been approved for the loans, and he was going to be able to make this really positive change and like this long term effect on their situation. And then Shin-ae goes to the hospital and needs major surgery, and he can't pay for it. So he has to take all of his loans and pay for it. And then now he can't have this long term goal to help them anymore because he needed to do this thing in the short term just to keep them alive, you know? And so
Right.
there's just like when you're constantly having to funnel everything into just stay alive today, you can't you can't set anything up in the future to be better.
Right. Like he, I feel like he very much is a victim of his circumstances. It's not that he hasn't tried. The problem is that he has tried and that life continues to get in the way. And in a way that Shin-ae has acknowledged. Obviously, of course, we can see that the real solution here is that first off, he should always have been honest with Shin-ae. He should have been treating her like like a teenager, right? But also the fact that um what was I going to say? I was reading the chat, sorry. But he also, it's he doesn't want to ask his child for help, right? Because like who wants to do that? Like his thing was because he himself failed to actually go to school because he himself got into that situation where he meets a girl and he gets a girl pregnant and now he's got family obligations and now he you can't follow this one dream, this is your life now. And obviously he wanted to give Shin-ae all of the opportunities that he didn't have. He didn't want her to be tied down. He didn't want her to have that obligation to take care of the family the way that he has. And while that's like a really valiant, noble want, right? He's literally trying to give her everything that he feels like she deserves that he never got. But as he doesn't see it the way she does, where you are literally risking your guys' not lives, but I guess like your safety because what was his plan? I don't think he had a plan. I think his plan was keep working until you get enough money and then
Yeah.
instead he winds up in the hospital and it's like I know we've talked about this before, but when you think about like what those takes were that drove Shin-ae to, reach out to Kosuke, who wasn't actually Kosuke, like the kind of desperate state they were in, that they were going to be kicked out if they didn't do anything. And like, understanding why Shimhan doesn't want to reveal this and why he would rather she goes to school than, work. Both because, I think it's clearly because he wants her to have the opportunities he didn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of shame in there, both because he didn't get to do what he's trying to offer her, but also because, as a parent, it's probably very difficult to admit that, we are not good. Things are very bad. I am failing to take care of us. And it's one of those things where I think even if he had told Shin-ae, there's going to be a rift, right? Like, and I think that's what he was trying to avoid, but inevitably it still came to happen.
Right. And it's like obviously Shanae, like she knows and she can feel things. And this is the same thing with, their eviction, their overall financial situation, the severity of his alcoholism, some of his history with their mother. Like she's not fully in the dark. Um, but he won't actually be honest with her because like you said, it's hard for him to open up and actually say it. With their mother, there's a lot of emotional history, and in the recent chapters, he said that it really puts him on edge to just talk about her at all. And there's this wanting to protect her from what actually happened. With the finances, there's kind of a last grip of control and some semblance of, I am providing in some way. I'm taking care of you by not letting this be your worry, but it already is. He's already failed to provide for her in a way where it's not permeating her life, because it's basically impossible for it to not. Um, but he is someone who struggles to be vulnerable, and this is something that Minhyuk had alluded to back when they were moving back into Shin-ae's apartment, where he said that both Simhan and Shin-ae really clam up about things and don't open up. And he himself alluded to it when he's talking to Isabel. And he opens up to her and he says that he has a partner, he has a daughter, he has a family now, but he he's telling her so much more than he's told them, most likely because it's easier to be vulnerable with a stranger than have to have these conversations with the people you love that essentially hinge on, I have failed to do what I wanted to do and to provide for you. And
I feel like I think it's extra hard for him too because, there are things that he's responsible for, but again, so much of it is just out of his control, beyond what he control. And I think that makes it really difficult to admit that you have no control over this situation, that everything that you've tried to alleviate it, either makes things worse or isn't helping. Um, and how do you deal with that?
right. And especially with Simhan, all kind of how what we were saying before, all of his choices really are trying to make things better. He's working all the time because they need money. You know, when we meet them at the point of getting evicted, he's drinking so that he can get up and go to work again the next day. He's pushing Shin-ae to focus on her studies so that she can get a degree and have the opportunities to not be living like him. He's discouraging her from things to try to avoid her falling into his life path. He's not telling her things to protect her from his situation. But ultimately, all of that is what puts them into a difficult position because, like we said, keeping these things a secret from Shin-ae failed to include her and just made her feel more and more like a burden and didn't open up any opportunities to help or make anything better and made her feel abandoned. Working all the time very clearly made her feel abandoned. And even though one big thing about Simhan is that we know that he loves Shin-ae and that his whole life is about providing for Shin-ae and caring about her. And that's part of what makes it hurt so much for them, that there is an absence of that love for her, not necessarily in the in the Kosuke and Alyssa way of they didn't have it at all, but in the fact that she knows that he loves her and she can feel that they have that bond, but it doesn't change the fact that he was never around, that she wanted and needed him to be there and he wasn't because he had to work. And then even though he's working all this time to get their physical and financial needs met, she's still looking at an empty fridge. She still can't buy new clothes when she needs them. Um she's still recycling his beer bottles. She still can't pay for school. She's still at the mercy of all of these unmet needs, even though he is legitimately trying his best. And this is him, very similar to Rand, him trying so hard to push her to not make his same mistakes and end up in his life is both what puts her on a path to do so, which I don't remember if we talked about that in a previous episode much, or if we said it in text in the Discord, but where she needs to take the opportunities currently available to her, because if she goes to school and amounts a ton of debt, how likely is it that she'll get anything out of it that would really be able to pull her out of that debt instead of just becoming someone like Simhan? Um, and also pushes her to stop doing what he wants her to do, which is, don't worry about it, focus on school, live your life, let me handle all this, and go behind his back to start working in secret because she knows that he won't let her, but she knows that they need the money. She needs to get her needs met, and ultimately leads her straight into the arms of the Hiraharas.
And I
And so,
think
like,
go on.
oh, I was gonna say, so like by trying so hard to protect her and doing it by leaving her out of it, it leads her right into those situations.
Right. And I feel like that's what's so unfortunate about him is, like you said, we know like his whole life is basically about providing for her and trying to give her the opportunities that he wants her to have, the opportunities that he knows he can't actually afford her, but he wants to try anyway. And like I feel like, like I said earlier, even if he had been upfront about things and honest about their situation, it probably still would have caused a rift in that relationship, right? Like that is something that was very inevitable and hard to fight. And I think that's probably part of what has kept him from opening up about it, both that shame in failing her and, kind of like fear, I think, of losing her. Because like I feel like there's going to be varying degrees of resentment no matter what, right? Like whether it's resentment because you have to work another job to help provide and you don't get to be at home studying for tests like everyone else your age is, or resentment because he wasn't honest and she still had to take those jobs, right? Like it's one of those where if we look at it from that situation of what could he have done differently that, would have made things play out better. It's kind of one of those situations of, like, could anything have, like obviously if she had been allowed to take a job from a, earlier point in the story, maybe they could have avoided getting to this dire point, right? But, even with her supplemental income, he still can't afford to go and get the help that he actually needs. He still has to take those extra shifts because, that was her supplemental income. And
it's like none of that is enough to send her to college. Like it's just
right,
barely enough to meet their current needs, and they still needed, the big donations to make rent.
right. Like if not for the charity organization that paid off the medical bills, how much worse would things be for them? And I find it really difficult talking about him because like I understand, like I fully understand the whole he has failed her. It is still neglect to some degree. But it feels like one of those things where I feel like I always have to preface it right because like there's neglect where, you're just like blindly ignoring a child's needs. And then there's neglect where it's like you have an obligation to work and earn money to try and take care of your child. And often in this case, it is at the detriment of you being around for them. And it's, fuck capitalism, right? Like that,
Right.
it's ultimately
And,
like,
I feel like with Simhan, like I feel like the biggest thing that could have made a difference is like we were kind of talking about, just being open with her and being able to
mm-hmm,
kind of have those conversations, because I think a majority of the resentment that she feels is, not for the fact that he exactly wasn't around or couldn't provide, even though obviously those things both very much affect her, but like she, similar to us, she knows that there might not have been anything else that he could actually do, but what he could change was the fact that like he kept trying to shy away from the conversation about it.
mm-hmm,
And she really needed him to be open so that she can have closure and acceptance of all of these things. Where like they can't change that they have no money. They can't change that her mother left with her sister and didn't say a word after. They can't change that he's already fallen into substance abuse and doesn't have the money to treat it.
Right.
Like
I
there's so much
go
about
on.
there's so much about their situation that they can't change, and you're going to feel bitter about that, but it's so much easier to handle. I feel like when you can literally just have those conversations and genuinely be like, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, this is why I need to do this, and how can we work this out? What can we do to make this better? This is the actual story of this gaping wound in your heart, and like they said on the balcony, actually being partners with each other. And like obviously, you don't like go over your tax return with your 12-year-old daughter. But you can do more, and you can include your family a bit. And because like again, like she obviously felt all of these things. She knew all of these things, and it was just like this big open secret, and it led to her internalizing all of it because it wasn't allowed to be externalized and open.
Right. I think that's probably the thing that I do hold against him. Because like you said, that they can't change their financial circumstances. It's difficult to even change the fact that he already has an addiction. But it is the closing her out and not letting her in part that I think is really what messed things up for them. And with all of his death flags on his head, like very much like the cases with Rand, that's the thing that I feel the most upset about, is that knowing how much he cares about her and how much he loves her, and the extent he's going to try to give her opportunities that he can't actually give her, but he still wants to try. And it makes it's like, we talk a
And
lot
it's
about
like,
how like the death flags on Rand's head, right? And like I
well,
feel like I have embraced that. I've accepted it. It's going to happen, and it's going to crush Kosuke. I mean, we'll see how he's feeling when we get through the reveals. But with
well,
Shin-ae and Shimhan, that's where it feels like that's where it's going to gut me, because it's knowing how hard he's trying despite the circumstances that they're in, and how much she just wants him around, and it's not something he can do, knowing that he tried. He got those loans, he went back to school, he was trying. Like, the whole reason she ends up at the formal in the first place is because she wants to save him, because she wants to help him. Like, I know for a fact, we've talked about that before too, how
oh yeah.
like it's all because ultimately she was trying to help her father, and
And she
for
says
her
it
to lose,
herself. She
right?
like
Like,
when she's, drugged and freaking out and being like pursued and chased and crying, she literally goes, I just wanted to help my dad.
and that just, it gets to me, and knowing that they're probably like, she's probably going to lose him before they ever have like a proper reconciliation, I think, because let's be real, he's going to be the first one. It's not going to be Rand. We need Rand around for a little while because flashbacks. It's going to be him first. I'm pretty certain. And
And it's just
the fact that he is trying to get help, and like obviously we've said before, like the help he's going through is not enough, and willpower alone is often not enough, because when when everything that drives you to that addiction is still present in your life, how are you supposed to get out of that, right?
right, it's like how do you get rid of the disease when all you can do is try to treat the symptoms?
Right. And
And it's
it
like,
crushes me.
and they're like you said, they're both trying so hard to just protect the other person and save each other and be good for each other and not be a burden to each other. but they're not able to let each other in and actually work together, and that's so much what's killing them. Where it's really clear with Shin-ae starting work, where she goes, I want to get a job because I know that we're struggling and it's hard for both of us, and it's going to be easier for both of us if I just do a little bit of work. And he goes, absolutely not. And so she goes, well, then I'm going to take these two jobs behind your back. And we see how quickly that tanks them. Where, like, if there was a genuine conversation, it was like, okay, Shin-ae does want to get a job. It would make her actually feel better, and it would make the situation better if she gets a job. How can we do this in a way that doesn't negatively impact both of us? Maybe things could have been different.
And this just goes to show that money can indeed buy happiness. Like, I mean, because obviously, so we clearly see, and we're going to get to this with Rand, that obviously, like, having money doesn't always make things better. But in their situation, in their circumstances, it absolutely would. If he wasn't forced to work so many hours a week, if she wasn't forced to also now have to work, if they could afford, their basic living, if they could afford him getting the help he needs, they wouldn't be in this situation. And that's like, that's such a big, I think, crutch about it, is that, like, they're struggling on a single income household, right? We're at a point where you basically need two incomes in order to, like, even afford life. And they have a single income and accrued debt over the years, probably decades at this point, going by ages. And it's just, it hurts knowing how much, it hurts knowing that there are things that could have been solved if they had the same means that other people do. That, like, even the park situation, like, how much it changes to be in a different socioeconomic bracket, and how much
Right.
people who are at that bottom rung suffer and struggle. And what we're seeing, with that whole with that whole dream arc, right, is that you can struggle and struggle and struggle, and it's still not going to be enough. You're basically, it's, like, if you're drowning, right? If you're treading water and you're spending all of your energy trying to stay afloat, you're going to sink. And
Right.
that's where
You're
they
never
are.
gonna actually get out. Like, all you're gonna do is tread, and there's nowhere that you can go because there's nothing left. And, like, you were talking around it, but, like, I'm just dropping in because Shin-ae did say it herself, that money isn't everything, not having it is. Where it's like, obviously, just throwing money doesn't fix all your problems, and like you said, we see that with Rand. We see that with Rand so clearly, where he thought that the answer to all of his problems was money, and then he realized, oh, um, but it removes those obstacles to where, like, will they have problems if all of their financial burdens are fixed? Yeah, they'll still have problems, some of which are related to their past financial trauma, some of which are not, but they'd be able to survive and in a position where they have the opportunity to make choices that make them happier. Where,
Right.
like, I said in our notes that Rand left things and people behind while Simhan was left behind. Where, like, part of the mirror foil situation with Simhan and Rand is that, like, Rand did have some more opportunities and choices than Simhan did, and he let go of things that he needed, and that's how he ended up here. But he did at some point have the opportunities. It's now too
Right.
late. He can't go back, but he at one point had them. Whereas Simhan's Simhan's choices were basically made by his circumstances around him. Their their mother left him with all of the debt. Shin-ae got in an accident and needed her medical bills paid. They had to move because the reputation of their mother was causing Shin-ae to be bullied. Like, he fell into substance abuse addiction. Like, obviously you have to make choices that lead you there, but he didn't actively decide, let me become an addict right now.
Right.
And so it's like part of the mirror foil is like he almost and kind of basically didn't have the opportunity to end up in a different place.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that that's pretty much right. Like, he didn't have that opportunity. Is it partly because of choices that he made when he was a teenager? Yeah. But, again, it shows that there are different opportunities offered at different socioeconomic levels. There is, privilege is a thing that we can physically see in this situation. Um, and I feel like it's a really good example of privilege, because obviously having privilege doesn't mean you have no problems. It just means you have, your problems, your obstacles are different, and maybe you have the means to take care of your problems in the ways that other people don't. The U's really demonstrate what it's like to be a family living in poverty who have no opportunities, who don't have the same advantages that others do. And I think that's why Yui making this offer to Shin-ae that she's inevitably going to have to accept is such a big deal, because people in her position don't get these opportunities. And as much as she doesn't want to be in debt to Yui, as much as she does not want to take handouts, as much as her pride, is at stake, she I think, she's starting to see what, at least we're seeing now, is that if you're treading water, you're never going to actually advance. You're just keeping yourself afloat. You're spending all of your energy trying to just stay alive. And if you're offered the opportunity to do more than stay alive, to actually live, you would be a fool not to take it. Like, that's so much going to be an arc of hers, is that she is such a self-righteous person. She's very guided by her morals and ethics. She feels very strongly about handouts because of the situation that she's lived her whole life. She doesn't want to be somebody that others take pity on, and she doesn't want to be somebody who is just given things that they didn't earn. But sometimes you have to. It's, we unfortunately know the truth is that the world is run by connections, and we see this clearly through Yui's struggles and the Hirahara company in general, is that you don't always have to earn things. Kosuke thinks he's earning things, and he's trying. Like, to his credit, he's putting in the work. But, sometimes you just have to take advantage of the opportunities that are offered to you. And what we know, that Shin-ae is basically going to have to swallow her pride and struggle with what it means for her ethically and morally to take a handout from somebody who she hates, who she wants nothing to do with, who has
Who knows will
literally,
trap her.
right, like, who has trapped her, who continues to chase her, who has basically pushed her into harm, because, Shin-ae doesn't realize it, but we know, like, the whole fall at the formal in the first place is Yui advancing on Null, knowing exactly what he would do, knowing that he would drop them. It's just, and it's
And
just,
it's like,
go on.
and this is, to me at least, this is so much of what the dream sequence was about. And I saw a lot of people, when it came out, thought that it was like about Shin-ae's relationship with Dieter, and like, we're like, why are we doing this? We already know all these things. But it was, at least the way that I read it, it was much more about Shin-ae starting to reconcile and rectify with her own paths in life, where,
Mm-hmm.
she's standing at this bus stop, and hop over the bus. She's standing at this bus stop, and, it's this metaphor that the path that she's currently on, the one that she's been on all of her life, the one that she's been told is going to have, is her only chance at getting out of this situation, her only way past poverty, her only way out of this, is a dead end. That if she follows what she has been working towards her whole life and what Simhan wants her to do, like you said, she's just always going to be treading water. She's likely never going to get above it because she's just going to end up in a bunch of student debt or, you know, low working jobs or burnt out or all of the above. And
And
that's
we all go on.
oh, and I was gonna say, and that's Simhan, where when she when she sees Dieter and he comes into being her guide, he's a person who he perceives as having it, I guess, more peaceful in a lot of ways, having more
Mm-hmm.
of his life figured out, on a better path than her. And so she starts diverging from the path and she's taking it all in and she's like, wow, look at this. You know, this is so much better. Look at all these wonders. And then comes the danger. And it's like, in order to in order to get somewhere different, she has to take a different path than the one she's always been on. And that path comes with both tremendous advantages and incredible dangers. And she has to take it if she wants to get anywhere. She's going to just be standing at this bus stop forever if she doesn't. There's no other way to get where she wants to go. But she needs to be very aware as she does it. And that feels very much like a metaphor about Yui's offer, where she has
Mm-hmm.
to take it because that's the only advantage that she's been offered, and it's a really strong advantage.
It
And it
is.
it sets up everything that she needs, but she knows that it's intended to be a trap and that there's strings attached to it and that there's a lot of danger, and she just has to be prepared to make her way down that path and not succumb to those dangers along the way.
Something that I was thinking about too is that, you know, even if she carried on this path, right? Suppose she manages to get a scholarship to go to college and, you know, we know she's still going to have student loans. But her choice in what she studies and, you know, the career that she decides on is largely going to be based on what's going to be able to provide for her, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
she's not going to go to college to pursue her dream. She's not going to go to college to pursue, you know, what she wants out of life. It's going to be what is going to take care of me and help me in the future. Whereas if she takes Yui's offer, it really opens those doors for her. Who does she really want to be? What is the field of study that she wants to do that has nothing to do with how much money she's going to earn? I think, you know, because she's Shin-ae, she still is probably going to think more proactively about it, but it leaves her more opportunity, right? Because there's a lot of careers where it's kind of like maybe it's not going to pay enough to make up for the, you know, the debt. But if you don't have to worry about student loan debt, if it's literally what career is going to be able to keep me afloat, you know, cover my rent and my, you know, food, if you don't have student, you know, that's that thing about the debt, right? Is like it's the debt that really drags you down.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of the debt that people accrue for basic things like, you know, medical bills, emergencies. That's again, that's that thing with Shin-ae, is that it was something that could not have been avoided. It, you know, like you couldn't not take her to the hospital and that's in those circumstances. That was
Right,
what
like the
saved
other
her
option is that
life.
she dies.
Right. But like as a result, you're now bogged down by all of this debt for keeping your child alive. And it fuck capitalism, right? Like that's the whole theme here. And like we keep going back to that. So it's kind of like, what opportunities does Shin-ae have if she goes through Yui's offer? What kind of life would she have if she knows at least I can get paid enough to cover these basics, right? Because that's the other thing too, is like, again, we talked about um, your connections. The people that she's going to meet and rub elbows with are going to be people who, as long as, you know, you treat them right, and I don't mean like in an illicit way, but I just mean, you know, like having a schmooze with people, right? You know, the very kind of stuff that Shin-ae hates and that like she's not going to want to do. Like that's going to be how you get anywhere. You have to make nice with the people that you hate and loathe so that you can get to a position where you can take care of yourself and maybe hopefully take some of them down in the, course of things.
Right. And it's like so much of it is that letting go of pride that you said earlier, where like just a couple episodes before the dream sequence, she's like, well, at least I'm not indebted to Yui. Like, glad I didn't take that offer. Sucks to be you. And it's like, but is it really a good thing that you didn't
Right.
take it? Like, what is really lying on the other end of that integrity and pride? And that is in partial Simhan's vice as well,
Mm-hmm.
where he's
That
too
pride.
prideful, to open
She
up
gets
and
it
let
from
him
him.
in. She does. And the way that she escapes his cycle is ultimately by learning to let go of the pride and hold on to your integrity while also taking advantage of the opportunities provided to you.
And again, I know that that's going to be a point of contention, like both for fandom and, suppose Shimhan lives long enough to see her take this, because I feel like as much as he wants her to take advantage of opportunities, if he knew anything about the Hiroharas, he wouldn't want her to take this. Obviously, she's probably not going to open up about that because, well, you're not going to let your father know that the person making, I feel like she might not even like tell him about the offer. Well, no, I'm going back and forth on that because she's the one who's trying
I
to, like treat him as a
I
partner,
wonder
but
I wonder about it a lot because it's like she keeps a lot of the details of the Hiroharas away from
mm-hmm,
everyone because she knows how bad it is.
right.
And it's like how, Dita reacted when she finally had to open up about the formal, where he was like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "What do you mean? Like it's not that bad." We're like
Right though. It
where like she's keeping it because she knows how it looks, right?
right.
And so like she does want to be partners with him, but they both do genuinely want to be partners with each other, but they also can see how bad things look and don't want to admit to how bad things are because they don't want the reaction that they know is coming. So I go back and forth a lot too on whether or not I think she'll tell him. I
Because
think
like how do you approach it, like, oh
right.
hi, the like chairwoman of the company that I've been working at behind your back has offered me a
Nope.
complete full ride 4 year to whatever school I want. No, it wasn't even 4 years. Didn't she say like study whatever you
However
want,
long
like
you need.
however long you need?
Yeah.
And like how do you
Literally
explain that
just
to
whatever you
somebody?
want to do. I
Right, like
I have a
no,
feeling that she might
make it sound
tell
like a
him about it.
scholarship.
Like some sort of thing where like she tells him about it and like he knows that it's a really generous offer, but she leaves out the details of exactly how
Right.
this happened and what the catch is.
Right,
Where I
because
mean,
like there's
and
no way to explain it that doesn't sound like A, charity, or B, a scam. And in a way it's kind of both, so
yeah, and I mean, at this point they've already had the rent donation, they've already had the charity. Like, is it really that like luck wise it's kind of unbelievable.
right.
But is it
And
really
especially when
now
like
that
it
unbelievable that like this woman, the chairman of the company, that sees that I'm really struggling and she wants, to help, she really likes me working here and wants to contribute because she knows our situation or something like that. Is it like obviously it's weird it happened a third time, but when
right.
true donations have already been, all fine and good and well, is it that unbelievable? Either that where, she kind of bends the truth, or that some sort of fallout has already happened by the time
Yes.
that she takes the offer and there's not a reason or opportunity to tell him.
Right. Yeah. Like that's kind of my thinking too, is that even when I think about the possibility of her telling, it's kind of like, if she gets that opportunity, if they get there.
Right.
um Yeah, because right, like I could see her maybe playing it off like a scholarship type thing, but then for it to keep happening year after year, and it's just like he'd have to get suspicious at some point. And obviously, yeah, by that point he's gonna be long gone. I'm sorry, Shimhan. You're not gonna last that long. We know it. Um, and that's the other thing that's really frustrating about it, is that, you know, everything that he's done essentially sacrificed to some degree, and he's not even going to get to see how it plays out for her. Like, I don't know. Like, I get really deeply feely about them just because it's one of those things where, like, we can see that obviously they love each other a lot. It's not, you know, like, nothing he has done has ever been with the intention of hurting her. And that's ultimately how he ends up hurting her. And that's the part that makes me feel really sad, is that they're not ever going to get that reconciliation that they deserve. And, you know, obviously fun mirrors with Noel, but it sucks. You know, like, that's what it comes down to. Like, I think the other thing that makes me so upset about them is that it is such a real situation, and it's such a real scenario. Like, there are so many people who wind up having to carry their families, you know, whether it's because their families were unable to get good jobs that provide better for them because we've decided that certain occupations are not deserving of a living wage, despite the fact that you're still doing a service to other people. Whether it's the fact that whether it's the fact that a what?
Support your local music therapist.
Woo. Whether it's the fact that their family has made bad choices that have resulted in their children having to help support them. It's such a real depiction of poverty and how it is a vicious cycle that is kind of designed, I guess, because, you know, we can call it that is designed to keep people in poverty. You know, like, everybody wants to sell you the American dream and tells you that, you know, oh, anybody can get rich in this country. But it's like, no, that's not, you know, like, Shin-ae proves that, you know, sometimes the rare person makes the right connections. But, you know, even as we said with her, like, the right connection, and I'm using air quotes here, is coming with risks. It's coming with danger. You know, Yui is not offering this to her out of the goodness of her heart. And Shin-ae knows that. And obviously that's what our whole time skip part of the story is going to, you know, follow. It's just kind of like taking that opportunity to at least elevate yourself out of the life that she's currently living. But even though it's going to put her in a different status, it's not going to be without its dangers and its own complications. That's heavy.
So God, it's just it's such a painful cycle, and it's such a hard situation to be in, especially because like both of them, but especially Shin-ae, it's like they didn't do it to themselves, and they've been trying so hard to get out of it. And it's like they're technically, I mean, if we ignore the alcoholism, which, I mean, yes, that's a part of it, but it's not the biggest part of it. Technically, they're doing everything right, quote unquote, and we know that it'll never be enough. It'll never work unless they take advantage of these essentially lucky, dangerous opportunities that they just happen to have been offered.
And that's also the lie about the American dream, is that if you're a good person and you're hardworking and you do what you're supposed to, you will eventually be able to rise up and up and up and, you know, go to a better place. Except, again, we see this with people in poverty, even people who are at like the fabled middle class at this point, right? Like, hard work doesn't get you anywhere. You know, being good doesn't get you anywhere. Like, Shin-ae had that realization at the formal, right? You know, like, all she wanted to do was be a good girl. She has tried to always be good and do the right thing and make the right choices. And even though she's consistently doing that, she's never rewarded for it. You know, she's good in school, she studies hard, and in the end, she still has to take 2 jobs in order to, be able to keep things going, at least while her father was in the hospital. The last we knew, she did want to drop the McDonald's job. But it's that unfortunate, like people believing in that myth and trying, and ultimately all of that hard work is going to go nowhere because, like we said, all of that hard work is only going to keeping you afloat. That it's not funneling anywhere else. And I think that's what makes it really difficult for me to think about them, especially because that's where that foil, the foil between Rand and Shimhan pops up, I think, is that Rand, not to say that Shimhan's choices haven't affected their situation, right? But like you said, Rand, he left people behind. Shimhan has been left behind. And I think that's why it's easier to be a little more sympathetic towards Shimhan, is knowing, the effort that he's put in, whereas Rand is kind of he made choices that ended, that he made choices without knowing what he was signing up for. And as a result, it has left him in a very also perilous situation where,
And it's
at least Shin-ae knows that her dad loves her, right?
and it's with Rand, Simhan is trying ultimately to clean up other people's mistakes. Rand is trying to clean up his own mistakes.
Yeah. What a big, big mistake those were.
Ugh. And it's again, he did not know exactly what he was getting into and what he was signing away and where things were leading. But they were still his choices. And he knows that. That's why, Simhan is regretful in just a general sad life way of woe is everything. I wish there was more I could have done. I wish things could have been better. Why does life suck so much kind of way? Whereas
right.
Rand is remorseful in a oops kind of way. A guilty way. This is all ultimately my fault way. And it's obviously this isn't what I thought was going to happen. This isn't what I wanted to happen. But if we look at it, if we trace it back,
right,
it's a little bit all my fault.
Especially because I feel like the big crux of Rand's situation is that he chose to forsake the things that he has come to find that he needs. He didn't have the foresight to know that he wanted and needed those things. But at the time, it sounded really good. At the time, it's marry this woman, get married into this family. You get to be heir to this big conglomerate. What could go wrong?
Oops. And we said, now he's just trying so hard to clean up his mistakes. Where most of the bad choices we've seen him make post everything that happened with Nessa are really about, he realized that his previous bad choices had put his sons in a dangerous position, and he's trying really hard to both maintain his own security that he's found and sacrificed so much for over the years, and to keep them secure and providing. Where Simhan is spending all of this time working to provide for Shin-ae and leaving her out so that he can provide for her. Whereas Rand is on the surface doing something ultimately similar, working all the time, not being there for his kids, not being present, not providing for them in a way that isn't physical. And he, very different from Simhan, he succeeds in the financial realm. They're taken care of in that regard, but they are woefully neglected in basically everything else, because that's not everything that a child needs. And we've talked about that with Shin-ae and Noel, where, the big advantage that they do have in their situations, for all of the disadvantages that they have, is that they did at some point in their life experience having a parent that does love them and understanding and knowing that their parent does love and care about them, where like that's not something that Rand provided either of these children. And he he tries to connect with them through all these disconnected means, sending money, promoting their reputations, trying to have them come together and look out for each other. But all it does is drive wedges between the brothers, between Rand and his sons, and um, lead them to, like, I don't know a concise way to say this, but have all these problems in their lives, like these
Right.
emotional and personal identity problems. And it's all because they needed Rand to be present, similar to how Shin-ae needed Simhan to be present, but at the same time, very different.
Right. Like, because, I mean, obviously it is the presence, but like they need the demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
And the demonstration is not something he can do. With Kosuke, it's because Yui literally is running interference and, is making sure that they don't get to have that connection. It's constantly keeping him out of arm's reach to Kosuke. And whereas with Noel, he literally could not show it because it put him in danger. We talk a lot about how so much of the things that Rand says to his sons can be taken with double meanings. Like he says something that he probably does on some level also mean, but he also has that double secret meaning for it. So like
Mm-hmm.
after Noel pleads guilty, Rand says a lot of hurtful things. And I think on some level he probably does mean some of the hurtful things he said, but I think there's also a double reading to it where it's kind of like, what if he had sent him off to boarding school instead? Like keeping him near because he wanted to at least be able to keep an eye on him. And, is this a fast pass spoiler I'm about to say? Potential fast pass spoiler. I can't remember which episodes are fast pass
I'll
still.
figure it out after.
But that flashback we had of Kosuke finding out what had happened to Nessa, right? And how clearly he's internalized that to be like he needs to keep Noel near so that, if something happens, he can be there. He can try to get involved before things get worse. Whereas, like that part of him has probably wondered, would it have been better to send him away? Not because he didn't want he didn't want to have anything to do with him, but because could it have been safer for him if he was away? But, we've also had conversations, you and I, about how, even sending him away probably wouldn't have been safe because, if Yui could just up and leave at any time or call upon connections elsewhere, right? Like clearly,
Then there's no one to come help.
right. Like it's just when you read Rand's words for those double meanings for, like I feel like a lot of that conversation, I feel like a lot of the barrage of insults and the awful things he was saying to Noel revealed not only like his frustration and anger with the fact that he's trying to guide Noel and Noel can't read it because he doesn't know what the fuck Rand is trying to say to him and trying to convey and tell him. It is also acknowledging to some degree his failings, his inability to protect Noel and keep him safe, and how, like there's so many things that he's tried to convey that neither Kosuke nor Noel understand because they don't speak his language. They haven't been around him long enough. They don't have a bond to understand what Rand is trying to say. And obviously we as readers acknowledge that he does this to protect them because, we know for a fact that if he shows any care towards Noel, Yui is going to get involved there. We know that she interferes with his relationship with Kosuke to such a degree that even now, when Rand tries to be more honest with him, when he tries to tell him the truth, like, I care about you. I don't want you to follow me in my footsteps. I genuinely want you to leave or to live your own life. Kosuke's hearing as like, I failed. I fucked up. Daddy's not proud of me. I gotta work harder. I gotta, gotta keep going. And it's like, that miscommunication because he doesn't have that presence in their life. And, again, obviously the outside circumstances, like Yui very much has his hands tied. Like that's so much of what Rand the Damned is about, is the fact that he is a man who made some choices that he did not know the foreseeable outcomes of. And as a result of those choices, he is now stuck, you know, trying to make up for the things that he's done, trying to make up for the things he didn't do.
Right. And it's like he made his choices, but like we've talked before about like Yui, like marrying Yui was the really big nail in that coffin. Like there were some opportunities to wiggle out of it if you tried really hard after that, but it still, if anything after that marriage would be so difficult to really
Right.
change the course of action for. And so that puts
Because
it in a position where like the real opportunities for this to be markedly different were like 30 years ago. And so
right.
now he's just trying his best to do what he can. And like you said, like so much of the strain between him and his sons is, you know, Yui like has Kosuke in a chokehold and she's got a gun pointed at Noel's head. And it's like if
that
he
really is it.
if he
like
so
that
much as
paper.
and if he so much as looks at either of them, like they're going down. So he has to try to circumvent it and like, get through in the corner of their eyes, but because they've never been in any sort of room with him without her, they've never been able to, like you said, learn his language. Whereas someone like Jace or someone like Yujing is like, oh yeah, like he says things like this, but we know that in reality, this is the kind of man that he is. This is what he means. And so they don't have that reference at all. They don't have that foundation. They were never able to build it, as well as they are both so much the embodiment of his failures in the same way that Simhan really doesn't want to open up to his family about how bad everything is and let them in and be part of it. Rand very likely feels a very genuine frustration when he interacts with his sons, and especially whenever things go wrong, because that is all of his failures staring and slapping him right back in the face. So
and
he
one of
thinks,
them looks just like him.
and like his double meaning words, like for example when he says like when he's berating Noel for being his son and says like maybe I should have sent you away, like there does seem to be a very genuine like frustration in there that does exist
Mm-hmm.
as he said it. It's just that behind that is the like, would things genuinely have been better? Would you have been safer? Like, I do care about you, and that's why I'm so frustrated because
And it's go on.
I was gonna say like because I care about you and because I have failed so badly.
And it's the way that Noel doesn't understand. So it always comes across as an insult. Like to say to your child's face, why do you have to be my son? Like, how is he going to take it any other way, right? Like he has no way of knowing otherwise. And I know this is why we so badly want him to read the Bible, because there must be some kind of exchange in there where, like, even though it's not going to contain the things that Rand responded to Nessa with, maybe there will be enough in there to start piecing together a puzzle for Noel that maybe even if he doesn't fully understand it, he can kind of start to see something, like why do you, it's just saying something like that to your child's face, and how is he supposed to interpret it in any other way? Like we also talk a lot about, and I'm pretty sure I put this in my Rand the Damned writing, is that so much of the things that he berates Noel for are clearly things that he wants to stamp out of him because he thinks it kind of exposes him to, the enemy, to Yui, to other people who would use him and take advantage of the good traits in him. Like he wants to harden Noel, not because he thinks that he's a terrible son and he just hates how he's turned out, but like because that is the only way that he can convey any protection to Noel. Like I think at some point in time in his life, he has made some kind of maybe possible peace with the fact that he will never be be able to be that father to Noel, that they, whatever relationship that he had wanted to have with him when, Noel was a kid clearly is out the window. Like there's no way that he can do it. And, maybe it kind of, I guess in the same way that he seems resigned to the fact that Kosuke has to be collateral damage of what they're going to publish in order to free Kosuke, even though Kosuke's not going to see that. I think it's very much that same situation with Noel, where it's kind of like he knows he has to be the bad guy. I don't think he likes it, but he plays that role because he knows that this is the only way that he can cast any form of protection on him. But again, we were saying, it doesn't work if Noel doesn't understand. Noel becomes defiant because it feels like everyone is just dumping on you and trashing you and making you feel like you, as you exist, are a terrible person. Everything is wrong with you. Right. How are you supposed to interpret it in any other way when all he ever does is picks at things? Obviously he's picking because he wants
nothing you do is
Noel.
ever good enough.
Right. And obviously he's saying and doing this because he wants Noel to change those parts of him. But all it does is makes him hunker down in the person that he is. And worse, he's now been pushed to playing the role that people have pinned him in. And Rand is a part of that.
And something that I find really interesting about, especially looking at Rand and Simhan kind of next to each other, is I talked earlier about how we saw a lot of the kind of failings in Simhan and Shin-ae's relationship and lack of partnership when she tried to get a job and he wouldn't let her, and then she went behind his back. Where when we get kind of that same sort of moment with Rand's kids, in the most evident one is obviously the formal with Noel, where he stands up and he's like, "I don't care what you think, Dad. I'm gonna go help my friend."
I'm gonna go be a good friend.
Right, and it's all the things about Noel that Rand has been berating all night, and he's, so angry with him, but that's the moment where Rand kind of starts to snap out of it and turn around and is proud of his son. And that's a similar attitude that he tries to get through to Kosuke, that you don't have to live this way. You can change things, we can do things differently. Which he never says in a way that's useful for them, in a way that they can actually internalize.
He says it as riddles, and it's they don't know your riddles.
But the second that he sees them actually veer towards that kind of independent and fighting spirit, he's really on board. And he starts trying harder to make a partnership with them and to even sacrifice himself because he knows that they can kind of carry on the torch, so to speak. Whereas with Simhan, he doubles down and he's like, no, stop that. You can't do that. And we see that, Simhan is very likely to not get out of his circumstances, and Shin-ae is only getting out of them by taking advantage of outside offers and circumstances. Whereas Rand is seemingly in this position where his kids are going to be able to fight their way out of this, and he is actually providing resources for them to do it, to the point where he is very likely going to, kind of go nuclear option and not make his way off the chessboard so that they can.
Yeah. I think the really ironic thing about that formal moment too is the things that he's berating Noel for are the things that ultimately land Noel in jail, right? It's running around and getting involved with all these other people. That is one of those situations, that's very much the thing that Rand has been trying to protect him from. Keep him out of danger, keep him low, lay low, go stay with your girlfriend, keep out of trouble, because it's not that Noel goes looking for trouble, it's that it always finds him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and it's one like I feel like realizing that Rand speaks in riddles like that and going back and rereading his words was like such a revelation because like we can see him for what he really is, like this very powerless man who is trying with what very little abilities he has to try to protect them, but we also see exactly how it fails and how it's all blowing up in his face. And again, also how he doesn't have other options, you know? Um, it's, I get, like I said, like with Shimhan, I feel a little more sympathy. It's easier to bully Rand, I guess, because
Rand's current hand-tied external circumstances are ultimately still a result of
right,
his
like
choices. I mean, when we trace it back enough to poor orphan Rand, it becomes less on him. But then we get to Nessa era Rand, and it's all on him. And then we get further, and
right,
it's not. He goes more in and out, more up and down. Whereas with Simhan, it's kind of like, I mean, and like there could be things that we're missing, but from what we know of him so far, it's a lot more genuinely just constantly battered by the world, and like the active mistakes he made weren't as bad as the ones Rand made. Which also includes
Rand,
the way that they treat their kids, because Rand certainly didn't have to be that cruel. Like, he couldn't be honest, he couldn't be affectionate, but I mean, did he really have to be that
right.
mean to them?
And like I'm so certain that the cruelty was like him coming to some kind of terms with the fact that you will never be able to be a father to them. So you have to do whatever you can to push them to change, to push them to, push them on this certain path, to instill certain traits in them, especially like something we talk about a lot is that clearly Rand looks at Noel and he sees himself. Not only in the fact that he is like literally he sees himself and he sees the woman that he failed. So, first off, that's fun. But he also sees himself in the way I guess in the way Youngie behaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to assume that the man Nessa described to Noel was, a true version of Rand who existed at one point in time. And that Youngie is very much that person, like Rand looks at Noel and he sees the mistakes that he himself made. He sees how he got led into this role. I know T mentioned this earlier about wanting so badly to know about Rand and Yui's origins, like whether or not they started as a team, whether or not she just kind of, played him. And, I feel like it has to be a business arrangement of some sort, but like she was proposing. Was she playing that they were going to be a team? And then she's just like, surprise, I trapped you. You just signed your soul to the devil, Um,
I feel like definitely before they were married, I think it was very much like a team. Like, hey, if we do this, it gets
right.
us both a little something, something. Like this will
And
be
he was
great for both of
enticed.
us. And
Like
right, and
the
quite honestly,
money,
who
the
wouldn't be?
family. Right,
And like,
right.
and then
Like,
what's just unclear is how long after the wedding did that partnership last? Like, how
right.
quickly did it fall apart? How overtly or covertly did it fall apart? Like, was it fully fallen apart before you could have even seen? Or like, was it a very stark, like, oops? Um,
T says
and
that he has to have noticed getting better treatment from her dad than she did. And I
I,
think that it's very possible that he didn't think anything of it. Because first off, he didn't have a family of his own.
yeah, to be fair, what
he
does he
doesn't
know?
know. He doesn't know. And like, oh, maybe they're just being nice to him. Maybe he's just nice. Like I guess like the thing that I really need to know about is like clearly Yui cannot have the role that Rand is going for, right? Like they're both chair people, but like clearly the goal was that Rand would become CEO at some point, or their child will, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, like, did Yui play off like she like this is where I need to know, like, how honest was her teamwork before she turned on him, I guess.
I
Because
really
maybe
have
he
a
accepted it
feeling.
as normal.
I really have a feeling that it was this preposition of joint ascension, where like it was probably clear that Yui
Mm,
couldn't become the CEO, but very much like the situation they're actually kind of in. It was like, I can't have this, but if we
but
get
you can.
married, you can, and you would never be able to have this if we weren't married, and neither would I. So
Yeah,
it's
I
like, if
think
we
that.
get married, we can share this trophy, this prize. And then it was only after the wedding that it kind of came out that it's like, actually, if we have to share, maybe we can for a while, but I would really like to actually have it myself. You've been
Yeah.
great. It's been swell. Thank you for all of your help.
You got my
Um,
foot in the
yes.
door.
Hope that you've enjoyed it while it's lasted. But
Right.
I'm really that the cake is mine actually. Um,
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I feel like I know people question whether or not there was some kind of attraction to her, and like, I'm not going to deny that that's a possibility, but I do think it was very largely that teamwork, this
mhm.
promise of something that they could share. And obviously, like we said, you would be a fool to pass up this opportunity. Um,
And it makes sense because she can't have it on her own.
Right. So, of course we're going to be a team. Of course we're going to, ascend together. Of course I'm going to help you. And then, like, in a way, it's a very naive of him because, obviously she has no intentions of sharing. But how is he supposed to know that? Like, when
Mhm.
you're presented basically a gold platter of everything you've ever wanted, the security, the finances that provide you security, because that's what we've talked about for Rand. Like, his idea of security is success and fortune, and you get a banging hot smoking babe for a wife who marries you into her family. Like, you are legally adopted into this family. Look at this. Now you've got a family that you've never had, and they have a baby together, and that's, his son, asterisk up here. That's his son, his family, like, for somebody in that position of his, where he literally is a rags to riches story, being swooped in by this, old money, multi-generational conglomerate family, like, that is success to him. Like, should he have been skeptical? Probably. But like, we also know that, Yui is so effective at masking and playing her roles. And even though this was, like 24 years ago, like, I feel like this is a skill that she's been honing for a long
Oh
time.
yeah.
And
Like,
if you yourself are like a young businessman, and, like, I feel like her feminine wiles versus his naivete and his hunger for success and fortune, it was just like such a bad match that even if like she wasn't on par with what she is now, the combination of it was probably enough to blind him to the things that he should have been skeptical of and that he should have been
and
questioning.
and ultimately, with the way that the Hirahara family is structured, it's very believable. Where it's not like when she's offering this to Shin-ae, where it's like, okay, it's no one's gonna do this out of the goodness of their heart. It's very clear that there's a catch here. Like, even if we take away all the previous stuff that they've been through, like someone offering, let me pay for your whole college, I'll get you into any school that you want, and you can take however long you want, however much money, I don't care. Like, that's, no matter who you are, that's gonna raise some questions. But with Yui, I feel like such an important piece is that element of the patriarchy in it, where she's like, I know that they will never let me have this position on my own, so I need you. This is mutually beneficial. There's something in it for both of us, and it looks true because it was true. The only like actual catch to that was that she believed that if she works the system for long enough, she can change the fact that she needs him. But at the
Hmm.
time, she's not going anywhere without him. So it makes sense especially when you pair it with who they both were and what the external circumstances and the reasons why Rand probably wouldn't have been seeing the catches anyway. But she was telling, like, if that was what she said and the offer that was made, she was telling the truth with the way that things were at that time. The lie in it technically wasn't a lie yet because she has to game the system to cast him out. The only thing that she left out was that, that I have the every intention of kicking you out one day because I expect that these chains won't bind me forever. And so much of like how Rand ended up here was that, like I was talking about with Shin-ae earlier with her dream sequence, of that kind of concept of a new path can have really great advantages and really great dangers. Rand didn't enter into this prepared for those dangers. Whereas Shin-ae is very clearly like, I see that there's catches to this. I might need this offer. I might take this offer. I might get a lot from this offer. And the way that I'm not going to end up, regretful and miserable with nothing at the end of this is by being aware that it's not all sunshine and rainbows from here on out.
And, Rand is aware of that now. Like, when he tells Shin-ae that, like, she's got her claws in you, and once she's got her claws in you, she's never going to let you go. She is going to hound you until she breaks you and until she forces you to do what she wants. So you might as well do it obligingly so that you can take advantage of it and use it as an opportunity rather than be boxed into a corner. And like, even again, he's not being perfectly straight with her and of like, my guy, you have to like use your words, but you have to use them in a way people understand. Like, you have been speaking in riddles for like 24 years. Have you not realized that nobody gets your riddles? Like, they're not going to cross your troll bridge because they don't know what you're trying to convey. And like, I think that's coming to Shin-ae in her subconscious, through that dream sequence she has, because like we said, she's looking at Dieter's path and saying, there are other paths in life, and there are people who have much better paths than I do, whose paths aren't, as like if Shin-ae's path is like the back alley that's like littered with, trash and beer bottles and stuff, like she's looking at Dieter's life in the same way that she looked at Alyssa's, right? And saying, what if I had that? And like you said, like her subconscious is aware that there's, is making her aware of the danger of taking this offer that Yui's made, but in a way that acknowledges that it gives her an advantage that she's never had. And so like, while she maybe consciously hasn't connected what Rand is saying, that no matter what, you're going to end up doing this. So either you make a choice and you do it, or you end up backed in the corner and, it crushes you. I think her subconscious is starting to acknowledge that like she needs to take advantage of the opportunity so that Yui can't force her into it at a point where now she can't do anything about it. But Rand, I need that man to like, and it's like one of those things where like literally if you go back and you reread the things that he says, you can easily find the double meaning, right? Like the first time I really picked up on it is when he's talking to Jace, I think, about Null, and he tells him to like bring Null to Kosuke because he wants he wants him to see what happens when you give yourself to the company.
Yeah.
Right. And he's really trying to say, you don't have to be here. I don't want you following in my footsteps. I don't want you competing with Kosuke. Look at what's happened to Kosuke and who he's become as a result of driving himself like this. And it's like neither Kosuke nor Noel understand this, because Noel's like, once again, he's just telling me what a fuck up I am and how much I should be more like Kosuke. And Kosuke is here going, I'm not good enough for daddy yet. I've got to keep working hard. Even though Rand says to him, I don't want you to follow me like this. He says to him on the phone that I care about you. I love you. And Kosuke can't even compute it because obviously daddy would never say this to me because I have failed. I fucked up. up. I don't even know where Noel is. And daddy loves me. Impossible. Does not compute. Must earn love in order to gain love. But if I lose Noel and I'm not taking care of him, then I'm not succeeding, and therefore daddy's gonna hate me. And so like it's like literally go back and reread like anything that he's saying, and you will find the double meanings. You will find what he's really trying to convey, even though like the way that it ends up coming out is like, I'm not proud of you. You're
You
a fuck
suck.
up. And it's just like right, Kiko says Ko was like, love for free after I fucked up? Nope. Nope, fake. All is fake. And he literally spirals from that moment out. Like it's the same course of action that happens when Noel tells Kosuke that he's going to continue working at the company. After Jace has already had the whole like, tee hee hee, you better watch out. He can come take your position, And just like, he spirals. Because like, Rand, this is all your fault. Literally. I mean, it's heavily Yui's fault too. I acknowledge this, but Rand, this is why we bully you, man. And like, again, like I acknowledge what could he have done in those positions? Like we fully know that if he showed Noel any of the love and affection that he wants to, that Noel deserves, it puts Noel's life in danger. And Rand is very aware that he cannot trust anyone. Like, even if he was to go to Noel and Nana's place to check on them, it's going to get back to Yui. And then Yui's going to be like, so what you doing around with your mistress's son? Like, what's happening there? He can't even do that. And
like,
that's what I get about him, or that's what gets me about him.
Right, and it's like, and when we think about Kosuke too, like it always sticks out to me the like fighting in the background of Kosuke's memory of his valedictorian graduation, where Yui is screaming at Rand because she's like, well, if you bothered to show up for your son, then maybe this day wouldn't be so horrible.
Know.
Yeah, like maybe you would know if you cared. And Rand screaming at her, and he's like, you didn't tell me when it is. And like, how was I supposed to come if I don't even know what day it is? And
I've got to leave
here. Like, I have to leave, and I'll be honest, it's very likely that like that business trip was strategically scheduled by not Rand. But like,
I think so too. I think every business trip that ever interfered with Kosuke's life was interference. Like, I'm dead certain of it.
And it's like, you can't talk to one son at all because talking to him shows that you care, and then the rain of Yui's wrath is going to come running down on him. But you can't talk to your other son because there's literally like a 50-foot wall in front of him, and you don't have any way to scale it. And however hard you try, you just get like shot down with a cannonball. And it's I'm really loving
want you to know, like,
today.
The images that you keep painting, like Yui with Kosuke in a chokehold and a gun to Noel's head, and then like Rand trying to scale this 50-foot wall and being shot at, like, when you wake up, you've got art to do. That's all I'm saying.
I'm really into the battle metaphors today.
I was like, I'm going to make a man that looks so pathetic.
Kiko said Yui exhibiting WWE levels of offense here.
And just really quickly, something that I want to say about the graduation, he was like, with them fighting, and all Kosuke wants is for his father to tell him how proud he is.
Right.
Like, that's what he needed. Like, the fighting, that part sucks. The Rand having a business trip, that part sucks. But if he had just, took him by the shoulders and looked him in the eyes and said, son, I'm proud of you. Like, these poor kids.
And it's like, obviously Rand is fighting with Yui because A, he's frustrated. Like, he's genuinely frustrated that this is happening. B, he wants to do something so that it doesn't happen again. Like, he's trying to change that long-term outcome and be like, how do I get to the next event, right? Like, I've been blocked from all
Right.
of them. I can't
He
talk to my
wants to
son.
be there. He wants to be a part of that. Like,
And, like,
that's the thing
that's
about Rand the Damned. Is like, he wants to be that active father that he is completely consistently denied at all fronts
right.
for
And, like,
either of them.
all the ways that he thinks that he needs to fight against Yui, that maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, in order to be able to earn the opportunity to be a present father, when those are the things that make that are like giving both of his sons this, daddy issues trauma. And like you said, he's at this graduation. What Kosuke needs is for him to like take him by the shoulders and say, "I'm proud of you." And could he do that? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know exactly. We only saw a very small snippet of the day, but it's very possible that he could have. But that's, in Rand's mind, is so overshadowed by, I need to fight this circumstance that is not letting me be actually present here for my son, as opposed to, what can I do while I'm here in these circumstances?
We also know Yui has a way of goading him. We
Oh
have
yeah.
like I am. This is not like anti-Yui propaganda. We have seen in very specific flashbacks of Kosuke's where Yui makes little digs. She
Mm-hmm.
says little things that she knows is going to set Rand off, that she knows is going to make him eventually blow up. That is what she's good at. Yui learns people's weaknesses and she uses it against them. She knows how to get under people's skin and she does it so well. And like you said, maybe he did have the opportunity, but maybe it was Yui making little snippy remarks until he finally explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Kosuke isn't going to remember all those details. He's going to remember his parents screaming at each other at his graduation. He graduated at 14 years old and like they're just like snapping at each other. Nobody's paying attention to the prodigal genius kid who, I just have to point out once again, literally raced through school so that he could join his father as quickly as possible in the workplace.
I just, hi, just sent this the world if the Hirahara children's family told them that they're loved and that they're proud of them, and it's just like
It's
flowers,
true.
sunshine, rainbows, hearts.
Like that's literally like that's that whole mirror between like Kosuke and Alyssa, right? And in this case also Noel, because Noel only
I
had
can't
that
believe
love
we
from his
brought in
mother.
Colas and mirrors.
I will find a way to bring the Calissa mirrors, right? Like, and Noel is even very much a part of this because he continues to believe that he is a mistake and a burden and that he has ruined people's lives and that his existence is, a disaster. And it's just like, this is like the difference between Shin-ae and them is that, Shin-ae, her resentment is different because her resentment is obviously about the fact that her father didn't treat her as a team where he needed to, that he wasn't honest with her where he needed to be. Kosuke and Noel's whole issue is, I don't believe my daddy loves me. And it's just, I feel like, we talk about how like Noel gets a little bit of this because of his mother, but like how part of why I don't want to make this about morals. Let me put this out there really quickly. I think part of what makes Shin-ae such a good person who is willing to take the chance on people who she believes in, and people who she sees something in, right, is that she has had that unconditional love. And it's made her, a person who, despite the fact that she very much is putting up walls and telling herself that people suck, I don't want to, make friends with people because all they're going to do is hurt you. There's that part of her that yearns, for that. And she's admitted this. And there's that part of her who wants to see that good in people if she sees that little glimpse of it. And I feel like so much of that comes from the fact that she has had a father who unconditionally loves her. She truly believes in the good in people, right? Like Yui and obviously, Song Troll to some extent are the people who have like defied that. They are the people who have proven to her that it turns out people aren't inherently good. Well, I mean, obviously the bullying has shown her that too, clearly. But, like there's a part of her that wants to believe that if you are good to people, they will be good back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
And
this is
even with
why
bullying, even with the bullies, she very much still internalized that, which was part of her, like, her burden issues and such, where she was like, why are they doing this to me? Because she still believed that if you are a good person, you put good out into the world, that people are ultimately good at heart. So it was so hard for her to conceptualize and reckon with, why is this happening?
right. And I feel like that is probably the big difference between her and the other three. Like, because Noel went from having unconditional love to, like, his own father, in his eyes and in our eyes, treats him like shit. He, his brother treats him like shit. It's just, again, if these people knew that they were loved, like, we know obviously that's
We'd
like
have no
Kosuke's.
story.
I mean, true. This is true. Like, and this is that thing that I keep coming back to is, like, even though I said I've made peace with the fact that Rand's gonna die, and I've like, it doesn't affect me quite as much. It affects me in the sense that Noel and Kosuke are never going to get to know. And obviously that, makes their eventual ability to gain closure without him, their ability to, like, move on, like, especially for Kosuke to be like, you know what, I never needed his approval. I can be someone without, I don't need to earn love. But at the same time, I still want them to know, like, the big sappy part of me that's like, Kosuke has literally spent his 24 years of life running after you and chasing after you and craving to just know that you're proud that he has done good. And the fact that, like, to some degree, like, obviously Rand is proud, but also, like, this isn't what he wanted for him, like, he's not entirely proud. Like, he's proud of Kosuke's achievements, but he's not proud that Kosuke has, like, literally forced himself into, this lifestyle without ever once exploring anything that brings him happiness, anything that brings him joy. Like,
and
go on.
Oh, and in the hospital, like, this is really apparent when Rand is talking to Shin-ae, where, he's asking her about how she met both of his sons, and in the course of this conversation, he basically says, oh, that makes sense, and how fitting, and how sad is it that both of my sons got the worst parts of me, right?
Oh,
And he says that about both of them, where like, he saw these bright, beautiful children, and he sees exactly how the way that he brought them into this world and the way that he raised them just, like,
you're
just
trying to make me
buried
cry
them in the
tonight.
pit. I'm sorry. Um, but, like, he really does see all of the things that he never wanted for either of them in the way that they're living right now. And we know that that's ultimately likely to change, but, how much has to be sacrificed to get there now? How much of it is ultimately Rand's fault? How much of it will and won't go away? And how it's just so sad. And especially also when we think about the way that he knew that he couldn't be present, right? And he knew that that was a bad thing ultimately. Like, there's a part of him, especially probably earlier in his life, that thought, well, what what humans need is, physical security and such. So if I provide that, they're all fine and good. Wash my hands, wipe them clean, like, great dad, proud father.
Woohoo.
But, as he started to realize for himself that it wasn't enough, theoretically you also realize that maybe your kids need more, right? But
Theoretically.
he tried to push the two of them together to make up for the fact that he couldn't give it. And we see this again, like, interesting mirror with Simhan, where, the Yu sisters were forced apart by someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Simhan tried to get them together and couldn't. Whereas with Nolan Kosuke, they were initially born apart because of Rand. And they were brought together by someone else, and then Rand shoved them together. And we watch how that ultimately drives a wedge between them and takes, this lack of emotional security and love and such that Rand is already not providing for them, and makes it so much worse because he's trying to go, well, you two can, penguin huddle and share the body warmth. And they just like simultaneously set on fire and freeze to death.
Beautiful imagery tonight.
I'm sorry.
Just top notch.
Maybe this is what happens when I don't sleep all week.
You make up the most dramatic analogies possible.
These are the images that are going through my head, and I need
the penguin huddling.
I need to share them. I need to convey them.
I need somebody drawing this. I'm just putting it out there. Somebody's got to draw this.
We got to draw out the sequence of this episode as the imagery that I've provided. And it's like, but it ties into how Kiko said it's the fact that they needed the bare minimum. And it's like both of these dads, the bare minimum was above the threshold that they could physically provide. And it was different bare minimums that their kids needed, but it was legitimately outside of their ability to provide that. And yet it was the bare minimum was what these kids needed.
I was going to say another parallel, because while you were talking about that, is the way that Rand also was trying to prevent his children from following in his footsteps, and he drove them into becoming exactly what he was trying to fight them not to be.
Oh yeah, and that's something that both of them do. And like we've already talked about how Shin-ae is going to get out of that, and Nolan Kosuke likely will as well. But it's through kind of directly defying their parents that they're going to be able to find those paths, and through other people's care and opportunities. And Rand has realized this. He's like, that's why he leaves Noel at the hospital. He's like, those got people, and it sure isn't me, and everything I've ever done has just kind of made things worse.
And again, like, this is some of those cases where it's like, because you left that message. Like, I feel like at some point Rand has, like, maybe he's made peace in the same way that I've made peace with the fact that Rand's going to be Rand's going to eventually die, right? Whereas, like, he doesn't want it to be true, but he begrudgingly has accepted that he doesn't have a role in Noel's life. And he never has. Yui has made sure of it. And that, why, what am I trying to say? It's kind of like, I think he does to some degree acknowledge the way that he hurts Noel, right? Like, he's trying to make him stronger and trying to equip him with the armor that is going to protect him, the very armor that he needs to go against Yui. And I think, what was I trying to say there? I keep getting lost. I think, like, at some point in time, he has accepted that he doesn't get to be Noel's father, and that is an unfortunate result of his choices and the circumstances and the fact that he wasn't supposed to exist, and now he does, and he has to live with the ramifications of it. And, that we haven't addressed that tonight, and I think maybe we should, is that very much is a choice. Right? Like, we've discussed that when Rand and Nessa, created Noel, it was probably during a point in Rand's life where he thought he is going to leave Yui, right? Like, it was probably during the separation, or, leading to the separation. In his mind, he's going to leave, and then reality sets in because he probably stands to lose everything. I mean, let's be real. If you're being legally adopted into this conglomerate family, there's probably some kind of prenup involved, right? Like, you're not walking away with anything.
Okay, I'll chime in with the way that the Mukoyoshi law works, which, I mean, I'm assuming that Kimchi is like following this basically to a T on how this works.
Same.
And I looked through a lot of sources to find actual information about like how it works. And did a lot of translating. where basically, in order to leave the family, Yui's family has to approve of it, and he is fully disowned.
Right.
So he, not even necessarily like a prenup situation where it's like we've drafted this contract, literally like a
Right.
you got all this because you are now the biological son. And the same way that if I disowned my biological son, he would no longer have anything. If you divorce her, you're no longer the biological son and you don't get anything. But also, if you do actually want to leave her, it's not just between the two of you. We have to sign those papers.
Right. And whether or not they are even going to be willing to agree. Yeah. And of course, the fact that he already has a son with this woman that he very likely would never get to see if he left. And I still stand firmly behind it that Kosuke is very much a part of the reason why Rand stayed. I'm sure that, the fact
and
that...
he said that. He said it to
Right. Right. I mean, I'm stating this for the people out there who continue to, deny Rand and Kosuke's relationship, because even though it is, textually confirmed now that Rand is not his father, that's biologically. And I feel like, and I won't say a lot about this because I know it's a topic that we want to talk about in the future.
It's
I
literally,
feel like,
I swear, once the character dive series is over, that's the next one.
yes, we've got to. I feel like I Love You has a lot of context, or no, what am I trying to say? I feel like blood ties versus found family is a big theme going on in I Love You. Like, it may not be like the central theme, but it is a very consistent, very loud theme. We've already seen this between Shin-ae and Shin-ae, and we've already seen it, with her and Minhyuk. And we have, we're getting a picture of how this might shape out in the future. And I think this is very much a truth when it comes to Rand and his sons. Because, just because Kosuke, even if Rand has suspected this, and he probably has, because he would not have had the blood tests done at this time if he did not have a suspicion. We don't know how long he suspected it for, but despite suspecting it, he still continues to try to be the father to Kosuke that he needs. He's still like that very night he has that phone call.
He has that phone call, and then he goes to the hospital and for once actually makes a very direct stand against Yui for Kosuke.
Right.
The same night that he orders this test.
Right. Like, calling her out on what she does, calling her out on how Kosuke has been a pawn in their relationship, because that's clearly what's happening. Like, whether or not he has realized the way that Yui used their relationship to, manipulate Kosuke and to further that drive, he at least knows that Yui is using him and using him against, him, Rand. Like, Rand is his father. He has always claimed that. Even if that boy is not related to him by blood, that is still his son. And knowing the confirmation isn't going to change how he feels about Kosuke. It, is going to impact how he already feels about Yui. But, it's one of those things that I feel like always needs to be said, because we know that there are people out there who still don't care about Kosuke, and that's fine if you don't care about him, but to try and use the whole Rand isn't his father, so that's why he treated him that way. No, Rand did everything that he could to be the father to Kosuke, to, like we said, within the means that he was able to. Obviously, he has had his hands tied. Obviously, he has made efforts. We know that he is not willingly taking we know he's not willingly taking business trips on Kosuke's birthday. We know that that's something that's probably prearranged by somebody else, not his choice.
And it's with both of these children, Rand's hands are tied because he cares about them. And you can so easily track all of the bad choices and all of the abandonments and all of the harsh words to the combination of Rand is literally not allowed to be near these children and show care for them, and Rand does want to be a father for them and wants to lead their lives in a good direction so badly and wants to atone for his past sins. And that is all both incompatible with each other and feeding into each other as a cycle. And nowhere in that equation do you need Rand treated Kosuke badly because he's not his biological son. Because it all reads and tracks perfectly without that. And truly, once you add that in, it takes away so much of the impact and the relationship. And the relationship makes less sense because that's not what Rand has always said. Like, that's not the way that he's always acted. That's not the regrets that he's demonstrated.
Yes. I was going to say, to me, the fact that Kosuke isn't his son, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this in the theory episode too, where like we were discussing this theory, where Kosuke not being Rand's son makes the fact that Rand has fought so hard to be his father mean even more, because it proves that it doesn't matter that he didn't father him. The point is that he, this was his son to raise, like where the kid came from doesn't matter. The point is he is a part of his family and he is doing everything he can in his abilities. And he wanted to be that father. Like, again, we know like that part of Rand who grew up without a family of his own. Like, I want to remind everybody that he aged out of the orphanage. It wasn't that, somebody adopted him. He aged out. He spent his entire life without a family. And he gets, he meets somebody who offers him this gold platter opportunity of benefits, and he has a family. And whether or not he has suspected it from the very first year, or if it was something that started to set in more recently, he continues to show that he cares about him and he wants to help him. Like, again, that phone call that very night where he admits that he messed up by asking Kosuke to look over Noel, realizing that, he was hoping that they would find comfort and solace in each other and that it never happened. But him continuing to push it was a fault of his own. He cares so much. And that is the thing that makes Rand so sympathetic to me is, like we said, obviously he didn't know ultimately how that choice he made was going to pan out. I don't hold that part against him. There are things that I hold against him, like, going to Nessa before he had confirmed what's going on in his relationship and his status as a part of this family, when he already has a family of his own, when he already has a son with this woman, and returning to somebody. I mean, this is what we assume based on how things are written so far, returning to somebody who he probably loved before all of that, and realizing that it turns out those feelings never go away. It turns out that this is what he's missing in his life, especially after, his brilliant fairy tale family relationship turns out to be, the devil in disguise. And just those are the things I hold against him. Like, it's not even that I'm like, boo, you whore, you cheated. It's boo, you gave her a false sense of promise that you had no means to be promising at that time. And I know we've also talked about this, is that we believe that he truly believed he was going to get out of that he was truly going to leave her. And so, maybe again, your parallels like Rand and Alyssa, right? Like, maybe he truly believed that it was possible that he could somehow be a father to Kosuke and, have his little happy life with Nessa. And obviously that's not possible. There was no room for it. Whether or not that was him being very naive and thinking that the family would let him go. Maybe it was just that reality set in one day and he realized, I fucked up, because obviously he did not want Nessa to keep the child, as, it's just those are the kinds of things I hold against him. But the fact that he's had his hands tied as a result of that choice, that, he is, I acknowledge he has done everything that he can in the means that he has. I acknowledge that he can't be the father to Noel that he wants to be. Could he have been nicer with his words? Good God, yes. Like, again, I know, like, he's doing that harsh father thing where he thinks, if you drill something into them, you can force them to make these changes. Because, like, in his mind, it's everything that again, Yoongi demonstrated, was everything that Rand probably saw in himself as a failing, right? The whole, you're always running around chasing people, trying to make them friends, like, what, especially at the Hero Heart events, right? You're going to find the wrong person, believing that maybe he's too trusting of these people. Maybe he's too kind. People take advantage of kindness. We've talked in the server about, was Rand and Yui's relationship a result of Rand being kind to her and her taking advantage of it? But right, like, ultimately I do think that Rand is very much a sympathetic character. It's easier to bully him because some of his choices are just a little, clearer. Like
It's
Nessa.
Simhan's hands were tied because he was never afforded any opportunities, while
Mm-hmm.
Rand's hands are tied because he had too many.
Yeah. What a summation. I will say that, and T even mentioned something about the brothers reunion. Okay, so T says, this is the brothers reunion I'm hoping Rand put together. Imagine like there's a cryptic engraving on the watch underneath, and it leads to a Bible passage, and Noel opens up that page and a secret letter for the boys to come together. I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like, I don't want to say it's like too cheesy because T
I
even
feel
said
like
cheesy herself.
yeah,
It
I feel like
it would be
pipe
so
dreamy.
ideal.
Yeah, I said pipe dreamy.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little too ideal, but I still love it. Like, I'm with you right there. Like, the idea of Rand, and okay, to be fair, it seems like it would be such a Rand thing, right? Like, put together this very, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe we'll say clumsy. That's not the word, but to put together this very clumsy, convoluted plan to draw them together, like, I will admit that seems very, very much in his manner of thinking that, okay, if I put this engraving here, then Kosuke is going to go find the only Bible in his vicinity, and it's Knowles, of course, but I do love
Only
that
Bible in
idea.
100-mile radius.
Right? Um, and to some degree too, again, because we talk about it a lot, the whole Shin-ae being the bridge to them. I do love the idea of them being able to reconcile without Rand, but in the same way that I want them to, make peace with Rand, I would love for them to reconcile because of Rand, like, because it was something that he tried so hard, that he pushed upon them. Like, for him to leave like this last opportunity where it's kind of like, you can make that choice yourself. I think that would make it really open-ended in a good way. But you're right. Like, I'm with you, T. I want them to know Rand's real feelings. Like, I feel like this is unfortunately going to be the kind of thing that does happen after Rand's kind of like, but in the same way that I need Noel to know that Kosuke is one of Yui's victims, I need them both to know that about Rand. Like, if Kosuke has to make his peace with, if he has to make his peace after learning that Rand has died, and finally he learns that, his mother was interfering, and, he might be somewhere within the realm of starting to piece those puzzle pieces together. But, if Kosuke makes his peace by realizing that Rand had his arms tied by his mother, that he did make the effort, that even if he never said it in words, Rand, was very much proud of who he had become. And what he really wanted for him was to find that happiness. I feel like that would be like a good, like, middle ground, because I want them to be able to sit down with Rand where he, says these things to him before, Yui finally like offs him. But I also know that we probably won't get
Ashley's
that.
really
And
gunning towards the Rand death in this. Like, I'm like hearing all the
let's
war imagery, and Ashley's just like, I'm dead.
like, because I feel like it's so difficult to talk about like these relationships without acknowledging that inevitably the things that we want probably aren't going to happen that way. And that I do think that there is still meaning to it happening after his death. But yeah, it is my fairy tale pipe dream. So, like, have them hear from Rand's mouth everything that he ever thought about them, everything that he's ever cared about them. For Rand to apologize to Noel's face for all of the hurtful things that he said and, use that very cliche, cheesy, it was all because I cared so much, it's right up there with like the whole, my ideal ending for Kosuke is he's on the piano, he's having a recital, and we've got Yujing and Hansuke who are somehow still alive, and Noel and Shin-ae there to greet him with flowers, and, Noel and Kosuke bickering, but in the, like, we love each other kind of way, like we butt heads because that's our relationship, but not because we hate each other now. Like, I have so many strong desires for things that we know we probably won't get because it would mean so much. I want them to hear it from him. I want them to hear the things that he was never able to say. Because listen, Rand, you know your time's limited. That's why you went to Kosuke. The blood is literally all over you right now, right? He knows. So go say to Noel the things that you want to say. Because, like, listen, Yui's already gonna go for him, right? And Noel knows this. He's fighting back now. Rand was there when he saw like the defiance tear between Yui and Noel. Like, go say the things, Rand, before you get like poisoned or axed or a induced heart attack. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't want them to have any parties. Like, I need them to have a casual get together where there are snacks and drinks and
there's
music.
Only one floor.
Only one floor. There's no pools and nobody calls it a party. The moment you call it a party, it's doomed. I think about this all the time because time skip, right? We're going to graduation and we're going to Shin-ae's birthday. Those are both things
better not be a party.
that people tell me, right? Those are both things that people have parties for.
The fact that Kimchi was complaining about how many people she had to put in the Christmas party, which is also, if anyone hasn't looked at the background characters during the Christmas party, please do it. It's hilarious. You can see how she clearly was like, I do not have the time.
She's like, these people don't matter. They don't get names. They don't even get faces. They're just literally here. They're just here, little blobs.
Like, look,
that's all that matters.
It's so funny. But the fact that she was like, after that arc, she was complaining about how difficult it was to draw all the party stuff and how it's always such a it's always so difficult. And she's like, no more parties from now on. Where I'm like, so Kimchi, that means that you have more parties planned, don't you?
I'm telling you, there is no way they're not going to have a party for Shin-ae and Maya graduating. Like, the only thing that could make it not happen is like if, God forbid, Simhan's death coincides with that.
Oh no!
Time. That is the only thing I think that would stop it. Because otherwise, like, Mina's gonna have a party, and she's not gonna let Shin-ae say no. She's gonna be like, it's for both of you, How's Shin-ae gonna get out of it? And they'll be like, oh, just invite some friends. And Shin-ae's gonna be like, well, my wannabe boyfriend's in jail, so I guess I'll just invite these guys. And then, like, listen, I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, I just clocked that you said my wannabe boyfriend's in jail.
I mean,
it's fine.
And the thing is,
I can't argue with that.
And the thing is, he can get out for good behavior. What if he just shows up? He's like, guess who's back? Guess who's here to ruin another party? I'm just
back again.
I really do. I hope Simhan at least makes it to graduation. Okay, we're going to put it out on the table now because we're already on this topic. You don't know we're on this topic, but we're on this topic. So, upcoming episodes, right? Kimchi has warned us we've got some crying episodes coming up. What's going to make us cry? Because I don't
want to think about it. I don't like to think about it.
She's not going to, like, kill Simhan off yet, right? Like, Isabel has only just entered the stage. Like, we're not there yet. What's going to make us cry? Because listen, every time we think that it's going to be Kosuke, Kimchi's like, why are you all crying about Kosuke? It's like, gee, I don't know. Maybe because you made him the saddest wet cat in the world, but
He
you
literally,
know.
like, in a comment on Patreon once, like, I said something about, like, how we were all broken because we were all just, like, crying in the Fast Pass thread for, like, 3 days. And she was like, this episode wasn't even sad. Like, what's wrong? Like, she's like, am I just broken? And I'm like, Kimchi, it's the implications.
Because it was the one where, was it when we were finding? No, it was like before that. It was like when Kosuke's like starting like Swaddle Kosuke Club.
I don't remember exactly what it was. It was around there though. But like the fact that she constantly puts out these like gut-wrenching episodes and is like, what do you mean you're sad? And that she literally was like, brace for the tears, guys. And it's like, what did you write?
Right. And right, like if she's, yeah, right. Because the only other time that she's like warned us for crying episodes were like really gut-wrenching episodes. I mean, okay, I
151
don't,
and 212.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think 151 actually made me cry, but 212 did.
It's also
So,
151. I've talked about this before too. We're like, 151 was the first episode we got like that. So it's not nearly as bad as the rest of them, but it was so shocking when we
yes,
got it that like I said, I've said this before about 212, but like, you know, there's a bunch of episodes where like you can throw out a number, like people know around where it was, but they don't know exactly what episode it was. Like 151 was really the first one, other than 64, 65, but that's partly because it was a double episode, so like it already stands out. But like 151 was really the first one where like you can say that number to anyone who was there when it dropped, and we all know her. Where like now there's a couple episodes like that, but that was the first one. Like that was the first taste of it, and so like that was the first warning she gave us, and then the next one that I remember getting was 212.
yes.
So
Hi said that 151 had a lot of emotion to it, but 212 sticks out to me more when it comes to heartbreak. And I think that's what it is, right? Like 151 stands out to us because it's really gut wrenching, but there's also a lot of confirmation going on, right? You know, like as much as like I mean, first off, it is a breakup episode, right? As much as it's like really sad in that regard, you can't help but kind of revel in what it like confirms.
yeah.
And like I do think the kinds of episodes that make me cry too are like I remember crying during the flashback arc, like that episode that starts with Shin-ae on the ground after the fall. And when she looks up at the bird and
My poor baby girl.
the part about, you know, like what it would be like to fly, and like
I know.
that makes me cry. Like I can't specifically remember the first episode that ever made me cry. I don't know if it was that one or if like I ever cried through another episode, but that one sticks out to me. Like it was the one.
I remember. I think the one that has truthfully gotten me the most was, and this is forever immortalized in the 239 thread, was 239 where we get the flashback to Noel coming to Kosuke after Nessa has died and being turned away and literally kicked in the snow, and like Kosuke, you know, wet cat throwing up on this toilet, remembering it. We're just like, just first watching how horrible what Noel went through at that time was, and then transitioning directly to this funeral for this girl that Kosuke also turned away, and seeing the connection between those two events, and then seeing how guilty Kosuke feels because he now realizes exactly what happened and what those people were feeling, and he knows that it's his own fault and that he didn't need to do it. Like
it was the transition to the funeral that did it for me.
And like
because
I remember
like
saying like,
go on.
and the way that it recontextualized past stuff, where like, especially when Kosuke said like in their fight where it was like, oh, what are you gonna do, like break down and cry? And I remember I just like screamed in all caps like, because Noel did break down and cry the first time that Kosuke said it all those years ago.
Oh, for me it was like that transition to the funeral that really did it, because like I don't want to say like I'm callous to the Noel and Kosuke relationship, but like I think it was one of those situations where it's kind of like I don't want to say it's shock because it wasn't that. It's just, I guess it was expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas,
we know
right.
we know a lot of that is there.
Whereas like turning to that funeral and realizing that connection is very much likely, between the thing that he never wanted Shin-ae to know about, the secret that Eugene has, the friend, or not the friend, but the person that she knows where something like this happened to her, just like putting all of those dots together.
It's
Yeah,
always
I
the
think,
connecting of the dots.
yes. I do think though 212 was the first one that made me cry. And then it's really funny because like I know that we've seen people out there who like even like the responses we saw on Reddit, because I definitely was not in the Discord yet. The responses to that on Reddit were like there are people who are still very callous about Kosuke, like very much like Noel's reaction is like, like, so what? I went through this too, and you know what? I haven't been bullying a child like you were. But like it was that confession from Kosuke, that admission that,
Mm-hmm.
he cared so much, but it scared him. Like his paranoia and fear overpowered how badly he wanted that relationship. And just like that panel where, like they're sitting under the street lamp and it's shining right down on them. And Kosuke just looks up with that most miserable expression. And like, while I understand why Noel is so callous in that moment, for me, it's like this realization of this is what, like we suspected a lot of this for a while, obviously, but like for
Mm-hmm.
Kosuke to admit it, to have it textually confirmed for us that these things that we've been thinking and suspecting are like actually true. And he said it of his own volition to Noel, like that was so huge to me. And just
Right.
we could have been a great team. Like,
Oh God.
destroys me every time.
And like,
Imagine if they could have, joined forces together. If Kosuke could have moved past the paranoia that was so deeply ingrained in him that obviously he
it would
couldn't.
have
But
been
just
so
imagine.
powerful.
Imagine if
And it's
they
like,
gave each other the love.
and it's like Kosuke is so much a testament to, and this is something that a lot of people don't feel very comfortable with, and that, like, I will just say is very, very relevant to my daily life, particularly in the setting that I work in. But the extent that people's fear can drive them to when they think that they are in danger, or when they think that they need to do something, when there is a threat, when they are just plain scared and afraid, a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with where that can lead you.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that that person who is so scared and sad can do such dire things because of it, and it doesn't change how scared and sad they are, and how maybe they're not a bad person, but that exists simultaneously with someone got hurt and it was their
Mm-hmm.
fault. Where like both, so much of 212 and a lot of why it, like, part of why it like hurts so much and like hurts so well, is that both of those brothers' reactions and feelings and experiences exist together and exist because of each other, and are valid in and of themselves, as well as missing so much.
I think it really said a lot about how Kosuke really feels about him too, that when he realized that something is wrong, like the blood pooling and Noel, like trying to stand up before he passes out and stuff, like that panic that sets in, and knowing that this isn't, oh no, dad's gonna hate me panic. It was legit concern over
Right.
Noel. And that it continues, that, he wakes up and one of the first things he asks about is Noel. That, like Yui is constantly brushing off his concern, but he wants to know. The fact that he goes to the hospital, and that's literally what triggers that whole flashback, this whole realization of what a wretched person he's been and what wretched things he's done as a result of that fear. Not to bring back the Colissa parallels, but like
It wouldn't
Kosuke
be an
and
episode
Alyssa,
without it.
Kosuke and Alyssa both are characters who are so hated for the things that they have done out of fear, out of, survival. And that's that thing. Because something that Kimchi has played with. You know, we were talking earlier about how privilege doesn't mean that you don't have problems. It just means that maybe you have different obstacles and you have access to, you know, other opportunities to help with your problems, right? But like when your problem is what their issue is, not feeling like you're loved, not feeling like you're secure, you're going to behave in that same basic, you know, need to survive way that, you know, Shin-ae does, that Null does. It's just because people look at them and their circumstances, because we see them essentially in, I don't want to say positions of power, because that's not really what it is with Alyssa towards Shin-ae, but we understand that on some level she's kind of above Shin-ae. If you get what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's got those advantages. And then once we add in those socioeconomic advantages, because, you know, there are so many people who do want to deny that, you know, if you are a rich person who has everything, of course you're not going to have problems. But like, I mean, that's Shanae's whole thing, right? Like, if I had Alyssa's life, if I lived in this house, if I had a mother who smells good and makes me my favorite cookies, you know, what wouldn't life be so much better? And it
And a
shows
part of
that
her can
even those.
feel that it's not true.
Hmm?
And a part of
Oh,
her
right,
can
right.
feel that it's not true too.
Because she does mention something at school about her family and Alyssa snaps. But it shows that, you know, those people can also still exist in a survival state if those basic needs aren't met, which, you know, goes back to like all of our original episodes, is that those basic needs are so important. It's not enough to have a house and have food. You need to know that you are secure in that house. You need to know that even if you fail, you still have a place in that house. Even if you go against people's wishes, you still have a family who's going to unconditionally love you. And I feel like that is so much like people look at those characters and think you should act differently because of what you have, instead of being able to see they are scraping just as hard to survive. I
It's
don't know how we got on this topic, given that this is the Rand and Simon
okay, I'm gonna
episode,
tie it.
but here we are.
I'm gonna tie it back a bit.
Okay,
This is a really general tie back.
it
but
works.
it's like we have so many different types of needs, and just
Hmm.
because one of them is filled doesn't mean that the rest of them are.
Right. And
Which
often
is
for them, it's at the detriment of the one that isn't filled.
right, which ties back into everything that we were talking about with Simhan and Rand, and like we said earlier, that like they were trying to provide the bare minimum of a certain need, and they met some needs and woefully failed on others because they weren't able to provide the minimum of that specific need, where we have all of these needs that need to be filled, and one of them being filled to the brim doesn't automatically donate to an empty cup.
Right. And unfortunately, as much as the fathers tried their best to meet those needs, it didn't make up for what they couldn't do. It didn't make up for the things that they couldn't control. And I just want them all to make peace, okay? Like, is that so much to ask for?
Yes.
Kimchi, listen, girl, I've been here so long, okay? I've been fast passing for so long. Please give me a
I've
little
been here for
nibble.
like 7 years.
You know
Probably
how
longer at this
people
point. That was a while ago that I calculated that.
You know how people had asked her in the past if like she would ever draw like an alternate ending of I Love You, you
And
know,
she
like
said no because it would be worse.
right. Or, you know, like, you know, what if you see like the outcome that could have been but was never gonna get to be? That's our situation. It's us pining and yearning for a reconciliation that probably isn't going to happen. And she's like, well, why would you want me to draw the alternative? Like, you don't have it. Isn't that gonna just like
Like,
make you
why
feel
let
like
me
shit?
dangle it in front of you?
Right? It's like, because we're masochists. We've been here for so long. Haven't you figured this part out yet? We are gluttons for punishment, and so sue me for wanting the idealized ending that we're never gonna get. And like, again, like I fully acknowledge that there is something that is very, like, in not getting those reconciliations and not having that peace, I think it does make whatever ending we're going to get mean a little more, just because they're going to have to make peace in lieu of what they could have been. They're going to have to make peace with a ghost. And that's difficult and that sucks. But Elle, don't even listen.
Don't acknowledge it. I put that in the chat for a reason.
To be fair, we started at like 7:30. That's not fair. It doesn't really make things better.
No, it doesn't.
Anyway, look at that.
For all the listeners at home, I sent a message that I intended to not be read on the air.
I thought you would just cut this. I just assumed that you would cut this part.
I think we can't now. I said that I can't. We were talking a bunch before this episode about how we thought that it was going to be short and be like a nice little segue back into the podcast after our break. And also, like, you know, it's been a pretty week for both of us. We were like, oh, we're kind of tired. I was like, I can't believe we said this episode was going to be short. And then Ashley over here acknowledges that.
I just assumed you would cut it.
I could still cut it, but you know.
But now you're not going to, because like it's already out there, and you're like, you know what? That, or you're gonna be like, this would be a nice outtake. So yeah, A Tale of Two Dads.
It's been a long time coming, but here it is.
And I feel like, you know, they are good characters to talk about. Like, I would not have written Rand the Damned if I don't feel for Rand, you know? Like, I admitted that I cried at the end of writing that, because I'm pretty sure that's where I was like, I started talking about how, you know, like, Rand tries to smother out of Noel the parts of himself that he sees in him, that ultimately he has wanted to be a father to these kids. Like, you know, we talked about this in the Yui episode. Rand has the role that Yui wants, and Yui is playing the role that Rand wishes he could. You know, like, in a nice, normal, healthy family, they wouldn't have to choose between these, but they aren't normal. Just as Yui always told Kosuke, they're not like other people.
And that's one thing that, I mean, it's not true in the way she means it, but she's not lying.
Right.
Right.
Our poor messy children.
And with that, we tell and end our tale of two dads.
Yay, thank you for joining us on this very loquacious and emotional journey.